Let's get started. Welcome to our second webinar on the Thrive Maine application cycle 2. We'll go over today how to apply and what we're looking for in the application. If you want more general information, check out our website, which is www.famemaine.com/thrive. You can also watch our first webinar, which we did last week. It's on the page, it's on the webpage, which talk about the program overall. I'm Laura Rigby, the program manager of Thrive, and Jen Cummings is also on the webinar with me. She's the director of business programming at FAME. So we're going to be telling you a bit more about this program. A little bit of housekeeping before we jump in. We'd love to answer your questions. Please use the Q&A function just left of the chat function at the bottom of your Zoom window. The reason we want to use Q&A and not chat is that Q&A allows us to pair the answer to the question and keep it organized. Chat is just kind of a running scroll. It's a continuous scroll of the chat, so it's really hard to organize what's the question and did we answer it and all of that. So let's use the Q&A function, put all of the questions there. We will answer them as we can throughout this webinar. But we likely won't be able to get to all of the questions live. And afterwards, we're going to review all of the questions and send out the written Q&A. So let's dive in. Let's get started. First, to ground ourselves in what is Thrive really quickly. It's a forgivable loan program for small businesses and nonprofits impacted by the pandemic. There was $58 million across the two cycles. Half of it was distributed in the fall in cycle 1, and half of it now is going to be deployed through this cycle. All of this is recovery funding by ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act, and allocated by the legislature and governor through Maine Jobs and Recovery Plan. And then there are general requirements. Not every single business in Maine will qualify. You can look over the details. These are firm rules. So if you have 600 employees, your application will not be considered, for example. There's tons more general information on our website and in the webinar that we recorded, all on famemaine.com/thrive. So if you got more questions there, go ahead and explore. But today we're going to really focus in on how to apply. And what that means is, how do you actually sign into the portal and kind of some general notes on using the portal? How do you calculate pandemic loss? Because that's very different than how we calculated, or not very different, but very different than how we proved it in cycle 1. Third, we're going to focus in on what is the impact statement and plan and what are we looking for in that. Also, an overview of our scoring process and timeline, and then a couple additional FAQs to consider at the end. Okay, how to apply. This is an online application. You are going to apply online. You do that through the Maine lending portal, and you can click on a link on our website to get there, or go directly to that webpage, mainelending.org. But it's not going to open until May 23rd at 9 a.m. So you can go to this website right now and you can click on the learn more about the Thrive program, but you can't actually start your application. That's closed for another week. So please don't send us emails asking for help on getting your application in. You can't do it yet. But this is what the website looks like. And what you'll do is you'll click on the learn more if you go straight to the website, which will then take you to the next page. This is what it looks like. It's got all sorts of details about it. Next week, there will be a button at the bottom of this page where you can begin your application. Right now, that button doesn't exist, but next week, or anytime in the application window, you can click on that button and start the application. So this is what you should be looking to, just to ground yourself. Once you can sign into the website, you'll either create a new account, or if you submitted an application in round 1, you'll already have a username and password that you can sign into. So you'll do that. we have a security code. This is two-factor authentication. This is what will happen. So you create an account or you try and log in. Your email address on file will be sent this one-time security code. It's a 6-digit number that you'll then have to put back into the website, just confirming that the email address and that you have on file is actually yours. This is for privacy reasons, for security reasons, to make sure, because you've got some really valuable information that you're putting into the application, and we want to keep it safe. A note here, some folks had trouble getting those two-factor authentication emails. They went to spam, they went to junk, they went through email filters. We found that Roadrunner email addresses had more troubles than other kinds. You can search your spam, talk to your IT administrator if you've got one. Another trick would be to add the no-reply@mainlending.org to your contact list. That helps the email filter. Just give one little sign of like, hey, this isn't a robot that I don't trust out in the internet. Those things were helpful to some applicants in round one. The other thing you can do is if you're not getting that email, that code only is good for 10, potentially 15 minutes. So if you're not getting that email within 90 seconds, try again, do it a couple times, search your junk folder, and try and get that code. Okay, a couple other little notes. You don't have to do your application all in one sitting. You can start your application, save it, come back, edit it, do a little bit more, and then submit when you're ready. We have that functionality in the portal. Don't feel like you have to sit down and do it all in one sitting. There are currently 3 example applications available at our Thrive website, faymaine.com/thrive, for you to check out exactly what questions we're going to ask in every single portion of the application, what types of answers we're looking for. Check them out. They can be helpful for you to start prepping your application or just get a sense of what we're looking for. And then third, if you submitted an application in cycle 1, we have pre-filled the duplicate questions in cycle 2 with your cycle 1 answers. So if you log on, don't be alarmed that some of your questions are already filled out. This is a computer just transferring the duplicate fields. So think like name, address, ownership. And if any of that's changed, don't worry about that. You can edit it once you're in, but also don't be freaked out that there are some answers in there if you submitted a cycle 1 application. Okay, so this is what the inside of the portal looks like. At the top of every page, you're going to get this, this kind of scroll. I think of it as like, looks like a subway map to me, right? But it's the full length of what is the application. And there are 3 general parts. So the first part is the general info. This is where you're writing down name, address, demographics, that kind of yes, no type of questions. The second part is the pandemic impact and the impact statement. That's what we're going to focus most on today in today's webinar. This is where the narrative of what happened in the pandemic and what you are planning to do really comes out. And then lastly, there is a section where you're going to have to submit bank account information and you'll have to review and submit. But this is the 3 big portions of the application, and this is what the portal looks like inside. So let's jump into calculating pandemic damage. The text above the blue bar is the first main question of what we're going to ask you about the pandemic damage to your organization. So we're asking you to create a narrative of the negative financial impact. We are asking you provide words and numbers about a variety of different variables of ways that your organization was impacted. You're writing a paragraph about it, but a few pointers. Please be specific. Don't tell me you lost revenue, period. Tell me how much revenue you lost, why you lost it, Give me comparisons to actuals. Don't give me comparisons to projections. You could imagine, and I'm sure nobody on the webinar would do this, but you could imagine that someone could say, well, I personally projected that my organization was going to make $50 million, and actually we only made $50. And so my pandemic damage is $49 million, or $50 million minus 50, right? We are looking for actuals so that we don't have to make the judgment of, well, is that aligned with industry standard? And what about your business model? There's a lot of assumptions that go into projections. We're looking for actuals. But again, be specific, use numbers. Tell me how much you lost. Tell me why you lost it. Be specific. Second, edit it. Make sure your narrative makes sense with your financials in two ways. First, just make sure it makes sense. Make sure the actual words just make sense to another human. You'd be surprised at sometimes how hard a first draft can be, right? And everyone just needs that second set of eyes or that second go around to make sure it makes sense. And second, make sure it corresponds with your financials that you're going to provide. So if you're telling me that your material cost went up 25% versus 2019 figures, but then I look at your financials and the revenue to COGS ratio or the COGS to profit ratio or whatever ratio, they're exactly the same between 2019 and 2020. That narrative, that word narrative and the numbers don't align. Make sure all of it aligns, and that will fully describe your impact. And then third, make sure it's all tied to the pandemic. If in 2020 you decided to semi-retire, that sounds lovely, that's wonderful, but your reduction in revenue then wasn't tied to the pandemic. It was tied to your own decision, and those losses wouldn't qualify for this program. And then lastly, remember that this is not the main focus of the application in cycle 2. Our focus is on future looking plans. So think through that. This is obviously important because it's part of the application, but we're really going to be focused in on your impact statement, which Jen is going to talk about in just a minute. So the second question that we're going to ask you about pandemic loss is basically, is the remaining amount of pandemic loss $10,000 or more? It's a yes, no question. And the way that you calculate it is you take all of the pandemic forgiven funding or grants, you subtract that amount from the amount of money you told me in the prior question you lost in the pandemic. And if that remaining amount is $10,000 or more, then you answer yes. If it's not, you answer no, and you can stop the application because then you're not eligible. There's a long list of what is forgiven funding or grants. There's a long list of programs from the federal level, state level, city level, county, all sorts of things. But the two key questions you got to ask yourself are, did the money come from some sort of government? And did I have to pay it back? And if it came from government and you don't have to pay it back, then it does need to be included on this list. So things like PPP, the EIDL advance, which was forgiven for most people, does need to be on it, but the EIDL does not because you have to pay back that loan. Things like MTI Prime, things like Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, the Maine Economic Recovery Grant. There's truly a super long list, and there's so many different categories, but ask yourself those questions. If those questions are, yes, it came from the government, and no, I don't have to pay it back, then it should be subtracted. This is about fairness. If someone lost $100,000 in the pandemic, but then all of this pandemic funding came back and they were able to amass $300,000 from it, that's not fair, right? There are businesses that are really hurting, and we want to make sure that we're getting it to businesses that haven't been fully made whole from pandemic losses just yet. We're also going to ask you this question about, is this remaining loss more than $250,000? This is just to get a sense of the size. And it's, again, a yes, no question, but the same type of formula. And that's really all we're asking about the pandemic damage. I'm going to pass it to Jennifer now, who's going to talk more about your impact statement and what we're looking for.
Thanks, Laura. So as Laura mentioned, the major focus of the application is the impact statement. And we're really looking for forward-thinking, project-based plans that will do a few things. And these are all things that will affect the scoring of your application. So as Laura mentioned, the COVID negative impact is really that $10,000 number that we want to see. And that will kind of get you through the gate to this step of the application as far as when awards are provided. So the objective is to further strengthen the Maine economy through impactful investments into the future. And the thought around doing it this way is really to look at thoughtful plans and project-based opportunities for Maine businesses to grow and expand the economy in the state. So as we look into these plans, we're looking for a few things. One is improving efficiency within your organization, developing additional capacity, enhancing your service options that you provide customers, diversifying and enhancing revenue streams, and adding quality jobs in Maine. And when we talk about quality jobs, we're looking at, do you offer benefits to your employees? Are they paid minimum wage, or what level of compensation do they receive, and do they have retirement savings plans? So we're going to provide you a template of questions that is going to help guide your impact statement, and it is 2 pages long. So I did see a couple questions in the chat about how long you're able to write. So we're asking that this impact statement be capped at that 2-page limit. And it does provide you with some detailed questions that will help you come up with the answers to your impact statement. And that will be on our website later today. So just as an FYI. So the 2 pages are going to describe what your plan is. So talk about, are you going to add another manufacturing line to your existing business? Why is that going to help your company succeed? Maybe you can create a different line of widget, or maybe you're doing something a little bit, or maybe you're just expanding your exact operation to allow for additional capacity. And what will happen when it does succeed? How is your business and the economic benefit to the state going to react to this plan or project-based investment into your company? And then, as I mentioned, the impact statement questions will be available on the website and in the application as well. So that template will be available within the application, and you can fill it out and then push it back into the system and upload it. That'll help you create the impact statements. So when we're talking about the plan, it's really important that we're using specific numbers, dollars, examples, and really specific details about what your intent is for the money, and creating a budget detailing exactly what you're asking for and how those costs will be used. So if you have that manufacturing line, it costs $400,000, and that's what the use is going to be. Don't ask for $600,000 or $500,000. It's really important that you're only asking for exactly what you need to complete the project. And the other really important point is there's, we are very general as far as, knowledge within specific industries. So it's really important that you don't assume that we understand your business model and what you're doing and why you're doing it or why you're asking to do it. So please make sure you're including these details when it's necessary. It'll really help us on the scoring side to understand what you're trying to do. It'll help your application. Make sure that you're proofreading, making sure it makes sense, and editing it as you go through. That'll be really helpful to us. We're assuming that we're going to have quite a few applications to score. So it's really important that they're clear and concise and provide enough detail to help us determine what you're looking for. So why will your plan be successful? Explain why this plan is right for this moment in time for your company, what will come of it, and why it wouldn't just happen on its own organically. So this investment or these dollars into your company will really help grow and stimulate that economy, whether it be direct or indirect jobs, and how it'll help grow areas of the state. Tell us about the market need or other evidence that you've determined that your product and service is needed and how this expansion will help that happen. Again, I think this portion of the impact statement will be helpful when you look at those sample applications on the website. We've really laid out some good examples of what we're actually looking for as far as specifics and details and how you can correlate that into your application. And make sure that we know why you're the right person or team to execute this plan. So making sure that we're understanding your management experience, whether it's you or someone else at your organization, why your team has that institutional knowledge to execute this plan and grow the company or grow the Maine economy, stimulate the Maine economy. So we're talking a lot about how the plan will impact others, but also how it will impact your organization internally and whether and what those triggers would be to help. To also describe the impact to your community, supply chain, and partners. So maybe if you're increasing the number of products that you're making, you're going to be purchasing additional or increased number of parts to create or components to make that that product. That may increase your supply chain's revenue. And maybe they're a Maine-based company, maybe they're not, but that would be an example of how those details will really help us as we look through all of these applications. And also describe the impact to your employees and the larger economy in the state. It's really important that we know how many employees you have, how their benefit packages, their compensation packages, and how this plan may or may not affect them if it's executed. So as we mentioned before, this is a competitive scored application model. We do want to make it really clear that not everyone that applies will be funded through a loan. So make sure you're submitting a thoughtful plan when you submit this to get the best chance of getting awarded. The cycle will be competitive and scored, not first come, first serve as it was in the first round, and applications with the highest scores will be awarded a forgivable loan. So every application we receive is going to be reviewed and scored by a team of business experts from different sectors. So I think right now we have about 20 people. So we do have a big team that we're going to be working with to score all of these applications and make sure that we're communicating with everyone in a timely fashion as quickly as we can. We do want to also be clear that that will be dependent on the number of applications that we get. So if we get 100, it's going to be very different than if we get 1,000. It may take us longer. So please have a little patience with us as we move through that process. We are set to open the portal at 9 a.m. on May 23rd. It'll be open for a month, closing on June 23rd at 4:30. So you will have some time to fill out the application. And if you run into issues or have questions, you can email us, and we have that contact information on the last slide at the end of the presentation. So feel free, if you run into trouble, make sure you shoot us an email and ask, and also be a little patient with the response time. We will get to you. Just the volume, depending on the volume, it may take a little bit of time. All decisions will be communicated to the group of applicants at the same time. So when we have reviewed everything, we're going to provide our scores, determine loan amounts, and everyone will be notified at the same time. And dependent on the number of applications we receive, we will get back to you within a set time frame. I believe we are going to really strive for 6 weeks, but depending on the number of applications, we're going to have to, that may stretch out a little longer. If you are approved for a forgivable loan, you may receive less than you requested in your application. So depending on the applicant pool and what the scoring model looks like and what we get for applications, we may or may not have to decrease award sizes. So our intention is not to cut them in half or give you 1/10 of what you asked for, but we also are trying to spread awards amongst as most companies as we can to make sure that everyone gets something. Not everyone gets something. The awardees get something. So it may or may not be exactly what you asked for. That's why it's important that we're not asking for monies that aren't preset as to what the use would be for it, as we talked about a couple slides prior. We did mention the scoring model a little bit in our last presentation, so we have a little bit more detail here that I'll go over. Applications will be compared to similar organization types. So nonprofits will be compared to other nonprofits. ESOPs, B Corps, and co-ops will be compared to like agencies amongst those organizational structures, as well as then the bucket for general nonprofits will also be compared to each other. So so by that organization type, and then also by designated full-time employee count. There were some questions around full-time employees and how to calculate those numbers. So we do have a video on our website that describes how to convert part-time or seasonal employees into full-time employees so that we can understand your employee count. It's really important that that's accurate. So please make sure if you haven't watched that quick video, it'll help you determine your FTE count for purposes of this application. And then businesses and projects in the prioritized industries. So construction, manufacturing, and science and technology will receive a 15% benefit within that scoring model. And this only applies to for-profit companies. So it does not apply to nonprofits, ESOPs, B Corps, and co-ops, only for C Corps, S Corps, LLCs. So I just want to make sure that's really clear. And then the main focus of the scoring model is based on that impact statement that you're going to be submitting with that 2-page outline of the questions that'll help you fill that out. Really important, only completed applications will be reviewed. So make sure that you're filling in and uploading all of the required documents. It's pretty clear in the application what is required. And in some instances, it won't let you move forward with the application until certain fields are filled out or documents are uploaded. No edits or additions can happen after the submission. So once you hit submit, you don't have an opportunity to change anything. You are able to save it as a draft and go back and work on it if you come up with a question that you're not quite sure and you might need a little more time finding the answer to. That's okay. You can save it and come back at a later date. We did get a couple questions that seemed consistent within the last webinar, and one of them is, if you filed an extension for your 22 taxes, are you still able to apply? What can you do? You absolutely can apply. All we need is the submission for the extension that you sent to the IRS. So that can be uploaded in replacement of your 2022 tax return, and that will not hurt you in the scoring model at all. And what if my organization has no employees? So we got this question a lot, and we kind of thought through, it's likely of someone that manages the daily operations. Who's the person that asked that question? They're obviously working in some capacity. They may not be paid. They may be a volunteer or a volunteer board. That's okay. Just make sure you're noting that within the application. You can put a 0 for FTEs when that question's asked, and then just put a note, because there is a section in the application that allows you to put in some additional information. So the key takeaways, make sure you get your unique entity identifier. And if you don't already have one, make sure you get the materials to get that done. There was a guest speaker on our last webinar that went over this process in kind of in detail and answered a lot of frequently asked questions. So if you haven't seen our last webinar, that would be a good place to start, and that's on our website, so you can definitely go take a peek at that, and also create a plan of what you'd use the money for and how it would improve your organization, being specific. So again, looking at that impact statement questions, that 2 pages of questions, and filling that in will help. Again, the application portal opens May 23rd and it closes a month later, June 23rd. Again, here's the email address if you have any questions following the webinar that aren't answered, you run into questions going forward. The video and the slides of today's webinar will be posted on our website before the end of the day. And then the question and answer box will be reviewed, and we will be adding that document to our website and sending that out via email to everyone that registered. So that'll be available as well. I think at this point, Laura and I are gonna go through the Q&A and try to answer some of those live. If I do see a question, if we receive funding, what reporting will be required on how we use the funds? The only thing that we're asking for for post-closing documentation is on an annual basis, we will be sending out kind of a confirmation that you'll have to sign saying that your employment numbers are what you had said they were, or they've grown, or if they've decreased, give us a reason why, and certifying that the company is still in operation. But there is no other reporting that will be required on that annual forgiveness document.
I think at this point, it might be more efficient for us to gather any last questions that you've got. Make sure to write them down in the question and answer function. We can then review all of them and put together a written Q&A instead of Jen and I trying to scroll through and pick out common questions and answering them live. We will send out the written Q&A as soon as possible. We'll put up the recording of this with the slides to the FameMaine.com/Thrive website, hopefully by the end of today. And we'll get the Q&A sent out and up on the website shortly after that. But trying to answer the open more than 50 questions just by popping around might not be the best use of all of your time. We know that you're really busy. We hope to see your applications and we hope that this can help you understand what we're looking for. We're using these questions when we are reviewing. So please look at these questions, please consider these questions, and we're excited to read your applications.
And if you don't have time to get your question in the Q&A, you can certainly email the thrive@famemaine.com inbox, and we'll get to you as well.
Super.
Thanks everyone for your time today.
Thank you.